Hello officially, and welcome to our complimentary online lunch event, which is brought to you by Matchboard in partnership with BPESA, South Africa's Industry Association for Globally Traded Services. This event is entitled Why Big Brands Are Flocking to South Africa for Software Development, and it will go for about 1 hour. During this time, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in a conversation around offshore software development and the opportunity to meet the Australian IT skills shortage from South Africa. We'll kick off with a keynote from Amazon Web Services, followed by a presentation on one Australian leader's journey outsourcing IT to South Africa. To conclude, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, so just think of your questions as we go along and feel free to make use of the chat functionality and pop the questions in there. I'm Sharon Melamed, and I'm Managing Director of Matchboard. I'll shortly introduce our first speaker, but just before I do, and while we're waiting for just one or two more, let's run through some quick housekeeping. Firstly, we'll record this event, but don't record it yourself. That's prohibited. Secondly, if you have internet issues, just dial in with the phone number and passcode in the invite. Finally, could I ask that you just stay on mute? You're welcome to have your videos on, but just stay on mute until question time to prevent outside noise for our speakers. And now to our first guest speaker, JP Horn at Amazon Web Services. JP leads public sector sales at AWS South Africa. Previously, he spent 5 years with the City of Cape Town, where he was responsible for the implementation of the city's 911 systems, a platform for policing and emergency services response management. JP has also worked for Microsoft and Oracle. He has a diverse perspective, working on both the buy and the supply side of IT. Now, I know it's just after 3 a.m. where you are, JP, so thanks so much for joining today, and I'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sharon, and good morning to the colleagues on the call. Or good afternoon. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I think I definitely want to take the time to share with you Amazon Web Services experience in terms of software development in South Africa and explain to you why we've decided on South Africa as a location for one of our 3 software developments across the centers across the world. So I'm going to jump straight into it, if that's okay. So I think our esteemed leader, I think many of you may know him, Jeff Bezos, founded Amazon about 20 odd years ago. And I think his principle of how or why starting the organization was centered around 3 big ideas. And this is ultimately the reason for our success. We've got this principle of putting the customer first. We call it customer obsession and sort of working backwards from the customer. The second focus for us was invent. I think we've invented quite a bit of products over the time. And I think lastly was to be patient, understanding that things take time, right? That things don't develop overnight, and success is obviously a journey. So I think with those 3 principles in mind, overarching our business operations across 24 different distinct distribution centers, and then specifically around 170 odd locations across the world. I think in terms of agenda, I'm just going to cover a couple of broad brushstrokes in terms of Amazon Web Services, give you a feel in terms of our culture of innovation. I'm going to talk to you a bit about our operations within the South African context, talk about some of our regional investment within South Africa, of which a big focus around software development and skills development, specifically in the region. And then I think lastly, sort of just, why South Africa in terms of a software development center and operation center for us. And then just talk to you about, development of industry services in this space. So again, I think our culture of innovation, is very much centered around making sure that we are able to do sort of radical transformation when it comes to inventing, and just ensure that we are unleashing creativity to sort of pursue dreams. And I think, there's a picture of Jeff Bezos's garage from back in the day, where essentially, like many, big IT conglomerates today, had started the invention process out of their garage. And this is ultimately where his first software venture had started. I think when he had started the Amazon.com business, in our online retail business. That was all done out of his garage. And I think this is true or holds true to many, so young and aspiring organizations that are focused around software development. That essentially happens out of the good old dark dungeon of the garage. So I think many of you know Amazon obviously started with books. That was our first go-to-market back then. And the whole concept of selling books online had evolved quite significantly. Making sure that obviously those books have now evolved to online. So with the advent of Kindle, those books have been digitized, and that's part of our innovation journey. But yeah, innovation spans across sort of many different domains, right? So for us, I think you'll get a bit of a feel there in terms of the various services and innovations that have happened over time. And ultimately, all of these innovations are centered around not only infrastructure to support these innovations, but also software. I think we've got quite a significant complement of software development across the world, and very much so in the South African context. So if you think of the concept of, you may see the advanced shopping called Amazon Go, if that's one of them I can call upon. It's the whole experience around being able to walk into a grocery store, pick your relevant products off the shelf and simply walk out, right? No checkout process, no payment transaction, all that gets enabled through software and the combination of hardware sensoring that takes place in that shop. So just to give you a bit of context relevant to some of that. Obviously, the one that I'm going to focus on today is our cloud computing business, known as Amazon Web Services. Very different from my on-run retail presence, known as Amazon.com. And I think that just talks to the next slide. So I think everyone familiar, Amazon.com is our online retail presence. There's a snapshot of one of our distribution centers that you can see over there. And obviously you'll see a lot of products that's arranged for delivery or fulfillment, as we call it. I think with that operation, we found ourselves, understanding how can we invent systems and processes to ensure that we can successfully deliver customers' products on time and to the right location. Those lessons learned in terms of how to effectively run a distribution and a fulfillment center has translated us into being able to do that in customers. So Amazon Web Services is ultimately a spin-off from our .com business, but very much focused around driving innovation, software and infrastructure development for our enterprise customers worldwide. Very much centered around sort of global data centers or infrastructure zones, as we call them, availability zones, giving customers the ability to be able to access cloud computing infrastructure from 24 plus locations across the world. I think I touched on the concept of customer obsession and the principle of working backwards from the customer. So this is a leading principle in our organization, understanding what are the customer's needs, what are the customer's pain points, and then being able to work backwards around solving what those pain points are through the use of technology and enabled by our partner network, essentially. I think one of the members on the call of BBD, we have one of our extensive partners within the region specifically. Very quickly, I just wanted to give you a brief history of Amazon in South Africa. And I bring up this slide because it's very pertinent to today's discussion. Back in 2004, we essentially created our Amazon Development Center. And this was very centered around ensuring that we have a presence within the region. Like I mentioned, I think we've got one of 3 software development centers across the world, one in the US, one in India, and of course, one in Cape Town, South Africa. What is very interesting around that, 2 years later, from that software development center, we launched a product called EC2, which is essentially our elastic compute cloud. It's our compute capability within the Amazon fold. What is really interesting about that is a worldwide global product, but was actually developed by a team of developers within the Cape Town Development Center. So think about how we took a group of software developers, relocated them from Seattle down to Cape Town, and they then developed our flagship product, which essentially has become the global compute product for us across the world. So a great story there to be told, how a software development center in South Africa has now essentially developed our global product that is service to offer to all our customers across the world. As we step forward, I'm not going to go into all that detail, but we essentially provide a retail customer support presence down in South Africa back in 2010, engineering teams, customer support teams, and then quite recently, as of April, we launched our AWS region, which is essentially our first presence within the African continent about providing an infrastructure data center presence. So we've essentially got 3 hyperscale data centers within the Cape Town region, which essentially serves all our customers for Africa, but also global. Represents the 24th infrastructure zone that we have in the world. From a staff complement perspective, we're sitting at about 5,000 staff across Cape Town and Joburg, Cape Town being the bulk of it. I think from that, we're probably looking at about 4,500 that are focused around just software development as part of our development center establishment. And then I think our regional investment, and I think this talks very true to the topic of discussion here today. You know, as an organization, we've made a decision to make a significant investment within the South African context for a number of reasons. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you know, very much focused around putting a presence within the region, making sure that we can get development center up and running. You know, very much focused around promoting cloud skills and job creation. This is essentially the heart of our strategic direction, understanding how important Africa is within the context of our global economy. A big focus around job creation for us, right? So quite recently during the COVID period, we had launched this concept of virtual contact center agents. And I think in a time where most organizations have been cutting jobs, Amazon had gone out to the market and promoted sort of 3,000 contact center agents working from home. I think it was quite a significant announcement that was made and hailed by our president at the time, saying we are actually creating jobs during this COVID period, as opposed to companies that are closing up shop. All of that is centered around our ability to be able to innovate and being able to serve our customers now from working from home or remote locations across the country. So I think as we lead into one of the final slides I wanted to bring across is, you know, why did Amazon choose South Africa as a location? And I think I'd taken you through the concept earlier, sorry, of where, you know, where we started our journey in terms of development center. A gentleman by the name of Chris Pinkham was essentially a South African, which was based out in the Seattle area. He was asked by Jeff Bezos and some of our leadership within AWS to essentially set up an operation out in the shores of South Africa. And it's essentially centered because of the pool of sort of high caliber IT skilled employees or workers. And we had good infrastructure within this area. So a combination of having the right skills and having the right infrastructure was the main reason why the organization decided to set up operation here. And like I mentioned earlier, we had then culminated the development of our flagship product out of that decision to want to move to the shores. You'll also see there that British and American firms sort of wanted to cut a significant amount of their costs for services. And we've seen, you know, being able to do so at 30 to 40% of cost reduction by specifically providing them from the South African region. I think some of the other reasons was very much it's centered around being able to speak English and the fact that the time zone is very close to the European or to the British market, making it very easy for those specific customer areas to be serviced from our customer support centers as well as software development. Just some comments there as well that, you know, South Africa offering great insurance and banking services within the space. Again, just focused around a pool of qualified people. And then, of course, having well-developed telecommunications and IT infrastructure. So I think, you know, broadband sort of penetration across the country is rather well. It's somewhat costly or expensive, but it's there, it's available. And making sure that good business services practice can be conducted from our shores. Like I said, it doesn't go without its challenges. I think I've mentioned the cost of bandwidth within the country is rather high when you compare it to any other region across the world. So our telcos are doing pretty well down this area. And then I think a challenge around sort of lack of consistent electricity supply comes with its own challenges. So imagine running, 3 hyperscale data centers across the country, and if power outages happen, which they do, we find ourselves in being able to have to supplement them by finding sort of redundancy processes and circumventing alternative energy supplies to ensure that we're able to keep operations up and running. So I think this is the heart of why Amazon sort of chose South Africa as a location, very much centered around skilled IT workforce, and then having a combination of good IT infrastructure to support operations for us in the region. I think a principle as well that I wanted to touch on is how we focus around hiring builders. Again, another culture in our organization. Each employee group are given the opportunity to create this concept of what we call two pizza teams. And essentially the concept is that you put together a small team that is focused around building a particular product or addressing a particular customer team. And the team shouldn't be larger than being able to feed the team with 2 pizza boxes. And those teams will specifically focus around building a particular product. So even if I look at me as being a sales guy, we have that rhythm within our organization that we would like to build a product to be able to solve a government customer challenges, as an example. And we do that out of the auspices of the organization, giving us time to go into a room and whiteboard and work backwards from the customer to solve that particular challenge. So giving us the freedom to essentially go and build. And a combination of that concept ultimately resonates and translates itself into a particular product that then services our customers. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but I think in the software development world, we've seen that a lot of organizations have moved away from this, large monolithic applications that used to do everything and was all-encompassing. What we've done within the marketplace is created the concept of microservices, which are sort of very small container-based capabilities that are then accessed through various APIs. So instead of having a one monolithic application, each Lego block, if I can call it that, is self-contained, is disconnected from another one in terms of failure, but are all interlinked through the concept of APIs. And I think we see that software trend across the world as it relates to microservices and then containerization of applications. Another fundamental principle which is governed by organization is being able to experiment early and frequently. So in the software development world, we're allowed to be able to obviously experiment. I think we all do, but the concept is focused around being able to fail, as we do as well, but fail fast and be able to embrace the learnings that come out of that failure. Again, the concept of Lego blocks, right? And that's why the picture's there. We have the ability to string a lot of microservices, which is essentially contained in a Lego block. And you have the ability to be able to string those together to build out, your pirate ship or whatever it is that you may be building. Very lastly, as I call this off, sort of, why AWS in terms of the software development environment. So you'll see over there through assessments that's been made by Gartner. I think everyone may be familiar with Gartner and the research that they provide within the ICT industry. Gartner has focused and done their studies relevant to the various software development organizations out there. And through this rating, you can see that Amazon has obviously scored very high in terms of its ability to do software development, not only for itself, but also for its customers. And this research, even though it's dated 2018, is still very much true in today's time. So again, just talking about how application and software development is obviously very critical to our business across the world. And again, I think as we talk to the future, as we talk to artificial intelligence and machine learning concepts, again, Amazon sort of being recognized as the leader within the cloud AI business, and specifically around the developer services related to AI, which again just talks to the principle of our leadership within the space of development and software development within the region. And I think with that, I'm going to hand over, sort of thank you for the opportunity again for us being able to share with you why Amazon has chosen South Africa as a distinct location, and being able to share with you some of our principles and our leadership principles as it relates to our business within the country. So yeah, thank you for that. And Sharon, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, JP. I'm sure everyone will have a question or two for you, but we'll save that to the end. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Luis Nejo. Luis is CEO and founder of digital transformation agency Digital Experience Labs, and he's the former head of technology for one of Australia's most successful life insurance distributors, Hollard Financial Services. So over to you, Luis. I think you might be on mute, Luis.
Sorry, Sharon, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
You can see my screen?
Yes, we can, perfectly.
Sorry, there's the joys of working from home, having 3 screens around you. You lose everything at the last moment. So yes, look, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. Very insightful, JP. There's a few notes that I made as you were talking there, which I'll circle back to, because there's some similar messages that I'm going to share with everyone here. But as Sharon mentioned, I'm here to share with you a journey of my own in offshoring development services to South Africa. And this was, for me, a bit of a personal journey of exploration, because I had come from that background of running large development functions internally, but also having partnered with I guess the more traditional partners that people go to when they think of offshoring in India and more recently Vietnam. But there's some distinct differences about the South African model that I was very happy to share in this call today. So just to kick things off, what I thought I should do is share a little bit of background of why offshoring was even on the table in the first place. So firstly, we came across an opportunity or an initiative, a project that was considered time critical. So there was a strong push to get it done and get it done quickly. Failing to do so would present not only risk, but also material opportunity loss as well. The decision to build, not buy, was a clear one for us. It was a very complex, innovative requirement. The products that were out on the market did not satisfy the competitive appetite of the organization, and we were very, very competitive. It was an organization that became the leader in its space within the first 6 months of its inception. So we like to move fast and we like to have control, and the off-the-shelf just didn't really, just didn't work for us. We had real resource constraints, as I'm sure everyone on this call can relate to. We had a number of in-flight projects. Everyone was committed in some way, shape or form. We could not disrupt those. So when you combine these 3 things, we knew that we needed to build a team and we needed to do it really quickly. However, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, the Australian recruitment market is a challenging one. I've always found it challenging. I've done more recruitment in my time than I'd like to admit to, but to try to spike a little nebulous of a team in a short space of time that couldn't meet the more the quality requirements that we had was going to be a problem, and we knew it, and it was going to be expensive and it was going to be slow. So all these things combined is what led us to the offshore market. And we looked at our options, we considered our options carefully, but it was clear, for a lot of the reasons that JP has already mentioned, that we needed something different. So first and foremost, we needed cultural alignment. We needed shared values. We needed a strong results-oriented partnership. We needed that flexibility, but we still needed that control. So we were a little bit difficult to work with, quite demanding, quite fast. And it was really important that anyone that we partner with can actually share that, embody that with us and be part of that. So that cultural alignment was number one by far. The added challenge that we had was that the scope of the project was yet to be defined. It was fluid from day one. We knew where we wanted to get to, but there were many paths that we could take to get there. And we needed somebody who could partner with us in giving that some shape and taking away from us the work that we didn't need to do, the commodity work, but do so autonomously. So there was no BRD in sight. You know, there was a high-level spec. We knew the high-level vision, but there was certainly no detail to what needed to be done. Flexibility was really, really important. So because of that, because of the fluidity in the scope, we needed to be fearless in our partnership in understanding that if we change our minds, if we change our direction, if we identify something that we didn't identify, be it either a good thing or a bad thing, we mustn't be afraid that it won't get called out, and B, we mustn't be defined or confined to a contract in dictating what to do. So I think a common problem in the offshoring model is the dependency that is placed on the contract supporting that engagement. Contract for me is something that you sign and you put in a drawer and hopefully you never look at it again. So the flexibility, not being able to define even the guardrails, you're reliant completely on trust and communication to be able to adapt as you need to. And this was going to be the only way that we could work. So because of everything I've shared already, there were no bookends, and certainly in my experience and in the experience of the people, a number of people that have gone through this themselves and continue to, the traditional offshore model, it works for some. It works for some projects. It would have worked, and it did work for that organization as well. But in this particular example, because we couldn't say exactly what we wanted to do, and because we didn't have the appetite or the desire to be very proactive in quality management, in overstating that quality management, we couldn't see that typical framework working. So my perception of the more common offshoring parts really require you to be very specific about what you need, very specific about what you need. Even then, there is the risk of interpretation of that. So you have to manage quality, not only in your testing, but in rounds of testing and vendor management. And we just did not have the time or the appetite to do that. The biggest problem that I have with that as a principle is that you're spending effort, time and money and headspace on things that do not actually add value. It is about preserving the relationship and managing risk that they're not actually delivering value. All of our effort, all of our money was going to go on actually doing the work that resulted in the outcome that we needed. So no bookends. And then lastly, we were driven by ROI and TCO, you know, and as obvious as that may sound, we were not motivated by a low day rate. And I'll touch on this in a moment, but there is a real difference between the day rate professional services rates that you get from South Africa versus say India or Vietnam or the Philippines. There is a material difference. However, we also understood that the total cost of ownership is not measured by that day rate, because there's a lot of other things that come into that, both in terms of the quality of the outcome that you get, the effort that you spend getting there, and but also the risk that you run in the mistakes that are made and the mistakes that are not perhaps shared with you because of fear around the contract that drives that relationship. So we were driven by the outcome, and we were driven by getting there really quickly and with a good quality result. So this is no rocket science, but I think this is really important. I'd like to talk about the model that worked for us at the time, and I think this would resonate with most. So the principles of engagement that we had were, number one, keeping within the business, keeping onshore, internal to the business, anything related to business engagement and enterprise architecture. We knew our business, we knew our people, we knew how they operate, we knew what they wanted, even the unspoken word. And so it was really important to us that we kept that knowledge pool within the team. Secondly, then offshoring the two solution architects and your development teams through that partner. That's, I guess, call it commodity work, understanding that they will operate within those principles and guardrails that you set in step one. So you give people room to move and to move freely, and trust that they will operate within that, and you don't need to supervise that, it'll get done. Thirdly, then from a quality point of view, it is a shared responsibility, but it is completely dependent on trust on communication, and collaboration. And all of these principles, all I'm really talking about is agile. And it sounds odd that I'm calling this out, but the reality is that agile typically doesn't work very well in offshore models. I see it fail all the time. Why? And the problem, I think, one of the opening problems is that you start the relationship with a heavy focus on the contract rather than looking at the solution and the outcomes. So the model that worked well for us was the business engagement, the analysis, understanding the problem, understanding the opportunity, handing that over, working really collaboratively with some really smart architects who knew better ways to do what we wanted to do, who then produced a result, tested and reviewed that result before handing back for us to then continue with testing and onto the next piece of work. So this was a true and a proper agile project, and it was a very successful agile project of that. So how do we go? So there was a number of benefits, and so I had to shortlist this one, but just to give you the highlights, without any doubt, what we experienced was very much seamless collaboration. It really felt like one team, and the feedback that we had from all internally to the organizations, that it felt like we just had expanded the team significantly overnight, and it felt no different to what they were used to, which was high touch relationship with our internal clients. So that cultural alignment was quite outstanding, actually. This is the thing that was new to me. I didn't appreciate as much at the time just how well aligned these cultures are. And to JP's point earlier, what I learned during this exercise is just the intense culture of innovation that exists within South Africa. It's quite amazing, and I didn't appreciate the history behind that, but it's very deep seated, and we see that even to today. We see that in any engagement that you have with South African services, be it either development or BPO or whatever it may be, that culture of innovation is there and is part of the education system. It's really important, actually, and it just it meant everything to us, because it meant then that every individual that we worked with, be it either fresh out of university or a 5-year experienced engineer or architect, they had this same drive to succeed and would do anything or speak openly in order to get there. And that's exactly what we needed. The culture then meant that we ran just a typical agile project, and it was also seamless. You know, we had that real sense of shared accountability, common principles, common goals, and the communication lines were always open. So talking about savings, I think it's really important to point out that the old way of thinking about the cost of offshoring, I felt for a long time, is broken. And going through this exercise really highlighted that for me, because looking back, we could see that the efficiencies that we had gained by working with people who work like us at our pace, you know, in a common direction. There was no contractual friction. There was no sense of, no, I better not say that because, you know, I might trigger, you know, a problem that you know, my boss will then. There was none of that. It was completely open. So what it meant was that we did have problems. We absolutely came across issues, but we picked them up early, and we dealt with them well, and we dealt with them quickly. We had minimal wastage. There was almost zero time required on onboarding this team. You know, people were ready to work. There was commonality, obviously, in the language, but they understood the domain. They understood what we're trying to do. So we're often running before we knew it. In fact, we had somebody physically sitting with them, I think 3 days after the initial conversation, working on a solution outline. It was that fast. So we saved time on the onboarding. In every requirement, running 2-week sprints, in every requirement, the process to take a requirement and flick that over the fence to the South African team to then work on. That wasn't a elongated 4-hour workshop. That was typically a 20-minute discussion and handover of some sketches, and they're away. And the added benefit that we saw was, and this should be possible in any offshoring arrangement where there's a time zone difference. We design by day. We design and define by day. Development happens overnight, and it's ready for testing in the morning. So we're able to work on small feature sets, and the rate of acceleration was incredible. And we didn't expect that. That was certainly a bit of a surprise. And we got into this rhythm really, really quickly. And to this day, I think this is only possible because everything I've shared with you so far, the culture, the communication, the drive to succeed, the drive to finish. And that's to JP's point. You know, you talk about the pizza team, the 2-pizza team. I think just the mentality that you have to have a small team with a big, hairy, audacious goal, and their willingness to actually get into it and do well, and having the trust that they have the capability to actually do it. So in terms of the quality of the skill, this is something that I found incredibly impressive as well, and really opened my eyes to something, because this really, for me, changes the paradigm from being focused on getting bums on seats, just getting as many developers into a room as I possibly can, to really bring it back down to a value-driven conversation around, I have an outcome and I'm looking for the right skills to do that, and having faith in the fact that there is such a deep and broad skill pool, an amazingly deep and broad skill pool, you know, really well educated, but really well experienced, independent thinking, engineers, architects, you know, you name it, and that then meant that we're able to move quite freely within this project. And me, as somebody who bore a big chunk of the accountability and responsibility for its success, having faith that this was a self-running machine. I didn't have to intervene and manage and check on quality at every interval. I just went along for the ride, to be honest. It was pretty good. So just in closing, my recommendations. Yeah, so clearly I'm a fan of the South African offshoring model. I think it's fair to say, otherwise I wouldn't be talking. But I do believe that there are some benefits, and I will be the first to say that it's not perhaps suited to every engagement, but it's certainly I think the first thing to consider when looking at any situation where you need to bolster your team either for a short or long period of time. So number one, my suggestion to the group would be to consider the risk and overhead with the offshoring model, and consider where value lies. So, you know, working with a partner that it almost feels more like an augmentation arrangement, and the sort of trust and seamless collaboration that you need in order to make it work. There is immense value, and it gives you, it's the sort of thing that lets you sleep. Consider the engagement model itself. So firstly, and I must say, one common mistake that I find, especially in large scale offshoring arrangements, is offshoring the responsibility. I think that's wrong. You know, so whether it's the whole project or a part of a project, you know, to say here, you know, here's a product that I want you to build, and you won't get paid if you don't build it. There's something about that that creates unnecessary tensions and biases and you know and fear. So looking at your own respective teams, how they engage with the business, where they add value, and consider what you keep in-house, and looking for a partner that can complement that rather than your typical sort of transactional type of arrangements. Don't chase a day rate. I think this is I'm hoping that we've evolved past this, but you know, again, there is a time and place for those types of projects. But I don't think we should start there. You know, I think we should really look at what we're trying to achieve, consider the real total cost of ownership and the risk, the opportunity cost of a low rate engagement, because the hidden costs are the ones that unfortunately a lot of us don't actually measure until it's way too late. And lastly, the whole idea of less is really more, and this talks back to the quality of the engagement, the quality of the personnel that you have working with you, and how surprisingly, or how you might be surprised in how much you can get from a smaller pool, and how much quicker you can actually get there as well. So that's it from me. Forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Lewis. That was excellent. And now it's over to our audience for questions. You can either ask the questions in the chat room privately, and I can read those out anonymously, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly, preferably with your camera on, but not essential. So if you do have a question, please unmute yourself now.
Hey Sharon, I'll kick off. So Chris Boxon here from Mervac. So thanks guys, that was great, and thanks JP for joining us at a horrific hour of the night. I don't think anyone wants to be awake at that time. but that's where my question goes to. So, Lewis, you touched on the sort of time difference piece, and that was definitely something that's jumped out for me. We've got a fairly small offshoring piece in Manila, and really one of the key things of why we chose that location was around the time zone piece. So was there a learning curve, I think, for the teams around that cadence of stuff happening sort of onshore from a design perspective and stuff moving across from a dev overnight and then the testing piece? Or, because I'm just curious there, because I've had challenges before with that where the productivity and the pace was actually really hard because stuff would get done overnight, there'd be questions on that, and then it's that sort of back and forth.
So it's a good question. I have to admit that I learned it by accident, but I tried to replicate it at a later date with a different group, and it didn't work so well. I guess the downside, and maybe perhaps what you're experiencing, is that you have a limited window. So when you wake up in the morning, if what you're expecting hasn't happened, then you're waiting another 24 hours, and that then just blows out your time frame. So I think depending on the location, firstly, this is why we found the South African model quite convenient, because there was enough overlap to be able to have a comfortable handover. You know that everyone's comfortable before you break away, and so it's not the complete opposite time zone. But I think a key ingredient to that is making sure that you have the right team to support that and receive that handover in the first place. So I'm not a big believer in if you haven't noticed already, in massive requirements documents, and so that really leaves a lot to the individuals that are caught in that exchange and making sure that they're on the same page. And that's why I think the cultural alignment of the South African model is key. I've not been successful in really doing that, to be honest with you, in any other arrangement.
Thank you, Lewis. We've actually had a flurry of questions come through on the chat. Before I read some of those out, I did want to introduce two other people who have joined us today from South Africa. In fact, two software development companies who will also be able to chime in and answer any questions. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Peter Searle, who is CEO of BBD, and Shashi Hansji, CEO at Intellect. Hi, Peter and Shashi.
Hi, Sharon.
Hello. Yes. Actually, I thought one of these questions you might be really good to answer, Shashi, because I know Intellect has more than 800 people in South Africa providing software development services, and also in other countries like New Zealand. And the question was, what has South Africa's response been to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how has this affected the industry over there?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, and hi, everyone else. Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we actually went into a really hard lockdown over here, much stricter than we actually saw in New Zealand and the Netherlands, where we also have offices. And the lockdown basically ruled out all non-essential services. So we weren't really allowed to leave the house. And if you did, there was a curfew at about 6 p.m. Amusingly, you weren't allowed to buy any alcohol or cigarettes for a while, which led to some interesting stories out there on the internet. But the underlying thing, I suppose, two elements to it. The first was that all essential services carried on as normal. So IT, telecoms, utilities, etc. And to put that into perspective, we were able to get 800 odd people working from home within one day. We might have seen about 1% of them have minor snags, which were easily solved by getting them 5G routers or UPSs or whatever. And as a tech services consultancy, all of our guys work on laptops and have good internet anyway. And I think being a bunch of introvert developers, they're all quite happy to work from home, although I think some of that novelty is worn off by now. And then I suppose the second thing that's interesting about South Africa from this perspective is that the telco providers, like JP said earlier, while expensive, are very mature. There's a lot of other standards in place. We've got our own version of GDPR. Security is taken really seriously. So getting secure access to our customer networks, etc. We're already compliant with a lot of that. So getting people working from home and staying productive from a business continuity perspective was absolutely seamless for ourselves as an IT provider. And and it was seamless for most of our customers as well from their IT perspective. And yeah, I suppose one positive side effect that we saw as well was a lot of our corporate customers needing to accelerate their digital transformation plans just because of the new normal. You know, people needing to access their services from elsewhere became the norm. And that was great for us. I mean, we had to form and storm a lot of new teams, a lot of new projects in that time, sort of similar to the experience we had with Lewis's team in the past, where, you know, you have 3 or 4 days to get something off the ground, you know, without needing a big spec, an augmentation type of model and working together. So we had a lot of those type of experiences. So yeah, I think the impact on the IT industry in South Africa was actually pretty minimal. In fact, almost positive in a lot of ways, aside from the obvious stuff that comes out of a pandemic. Those mature infrastructure and standards meant that we really weren't affected at all, Sharon.
Thank you very much. We had another question through, which is interesting in light of the fact that there are just so many big brands internationally outsourcing software development to South Africa. I know of AIA, Vodafone, eBay, Hollard, just as examples of a few. And so the question was to the vendors, why are your international clients telling you they have preferred South Africa over other more traditional destinations? I know Lewis gave his view, but maybe I could hand over to Peter, the CEO at BBD, which is a global bespoke software development company with 35 years delivery experience for clients across multiple continents. Peter, what are your clients telling you the number one reason is that they're preferring South Africa for the development needs?
Thank you, Sharon, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I think, first of all, JP and Lewis have done such a fantastic job of describing how you work with South African software development companies that it's hard not just to echo some of those responses and answers already received. So certainly from our perspective, a massive focus in the South African kind of culture of software development is on delivery and delivering a shared outcome of what the client's actually looking for. I think Lewis spoke about this in a lot of detail, but certainly that kind of cultural essence of what South Africa is about is very much part of that and distinguishes us. And we are told, certainly in our engagements with offshore clients, an example would be a big UK business that specifically spoke about that as a contrast to the approach received from an Indian outsourcer, which had focused more on a traditional outsourcing model, which was to put the bodies there and as per Lewis on a contractual basis. So that kind of shared outcome focus on delivery is, I think, probably the most outstanding difference. Also mentioned was the quality of the software engineers. There really are some fantastic guys with really good experience in delivering these types of solutions and in the more modern techs. I mean, you mentioned with BBD the 35 years. I mean, certainly 35 years ago, we weren't utilizing agile or scaled agile approaches to delivery of software, but yet the culture, in fact, is exactly the same of hardcore software engineering skills, delivering on a shared outcomes basis. So that I think are the essential kind of differences. There was a touch on price. I mean, yeah, we certainly are cheaper than, should we say more cost effective, cheap's a terrible way of putting it, than I think an Australian sort of homegrown business, because clearly our cost points are different. When I've traveled to Australia, I mean, some of the prices there are a little bit shocking on a rand basis. But yeah, certainly we don't compete with the traditional India or Philippines offshore on a sort of hourly rate kind of basis. But certainly, again, from a delivery perspective, the value that you get back from a South African business based on the kind of approach we would typically take of working as in a partnership shared outcomes model, certainly the value is based on a cost of delivery as opposed to actual a rate per hour is significantly better. And again, this is what we've been seeing through partnerships and working with some of our clients. An example would be Vodacom / South Africa's Vodafone Group contracting through their kind of international procurement business, which sits in Luxembourg. You know, they work on a comparative basis around the world, but certainly on a measure of value, we stand ahead of many.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. Just the cultural similarity as well of us to, I think, Australia would also be an outstanding point. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. Is there anything being done to support young people to become engineers, or is it only focused on existing / experienced engineers? Maybe Shashi, you would like to take that one first?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. So South Africa's got an interesting history. I think there's a huge focus across the board by our government and our private sector in getting young people into employment. Engineering in particular, it's one of the biggest skill shortages in the world. So, you know, there's a lot of great universities here producing good talent, but also a lot of different coding academies and that type of thing that have come from all around the world and actually set up in South Africa, which, you know, I think ourselves and Peter's company are partners with in many ways. Yeah, I think, you know, we take on about 70 odd graduates a year, boot camp them up and get them across projects, get them working in best practice and etc. very quickly. So there's actually quite a lot being done, and I think the country has seen that this is an area that we can really compete in, because we can have, you know, like the guys have said to now, you get a bit of a cost saving from working with South Africa, but you also get that, you know, that deep-seated problem solving, collaborative nature of working. You know, we like to think ourselves as being able to hustle and figure things out, and that's a great trait of engineers, I think, around the world.
Thank you, Shashi. I can see Neil's turned off his mute button, so I know he's chomping at the bit. I'll just read one quick question for Lewis and we'll go to Neil. The question for Lewis is, why did Lewis decide on the testing to remain in-house?
User testing. So, you know, I didn't want to put too many boxes on that slide, to be honest with you, but we have a particular, and this has followed me to this day, a very sort of rigorous testing regime, which is broken up into lots of small parts, from shoulder checks to peer reviews, and still doing the user testing that you would expect at the end of a feature or end of a sprint. So what I was trying to articulate there on that slide is just that, you know, number one, that testing is shared. And a lot of the testing actually occurs, particularly at the unit testing level, before a piece of work is handed back over for user acceptance. And to be honest with you, a big part of that is not about managing quality. It's more about managing the business, because the business needs to be part of that journey as well. Thank you, Lewis. Neil, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Sharon. Sorry, Lewis, it's another one for you, I think. I understand in terms of outsourcing the things like accounts payable, receivable, that's pretty easy, straightforward. When it comes to software development, it's a lot more complex. So I'm interested what you did in terms of the due diligence before you chose who you chose. So I've done a lot of other outsourcing, and I've done very small amounts of development. If I was starting that now and going down this path, what are the things I would need to look at in vendors before I decide who to use? So I understand the value proposition. That's none of that. It's purely about the ability to do the job. So if you can just share sort of, you know, you'd have looked at, I guess, a couple of options, and what did you look at? Or what was important? It's so, really interesting. It's a development's quite unique in a way. Yeah. Yeah,
it can be, and if it's not what you do every day, it certainly would be. Yeah. But so, at the risk of offending thousands of professionals, I would say take the due diligence practices that you would normally do for an offshoring software development project and toss them out the window. And because ultimately you can ask all the questions you like, it does not guarantee success. You need to have some faith in the partner on the other side that is actually committed to the outcome that you're looking for. And yes, you can do reference checks, and yes, you want to do some financial checks and make sure that they're capable of actually finishing. But the way that we do that is we like to get hands-on. We'll have an open discussion about what we're trying to do and test your awareness and your sensitivity to the problem, and let the partner actually guide us through that exercise. I find that in a lot of these more transactional arrangements, it's tell me what you like, tell me what you need to buy, tell us what your budget is, and it's all one direction. Tell me, and you're setting the boundaries of that. But a true collaborative one is where that person or that organization is committed to that, and they will ask the questions that they need in order to be able to work out if and how they can get you there. So it's not a clear answer because there's no framework for it, to be honest with you. You know, I think a lot of it comes down from in terms of how you initially engage and being very hands-on. And I see you've got a whiteboard behind you. We would be standing at that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Neil. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, I think we've got time for one last one. Okay. Yep. Standards and data protection. What is the story in South Africa? Someone has submitted that question. If we could just provide maybe a few dot points on that, starting with Peter, where South African vendors stand in terms of data security and industry standards.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, in South Africa, the GDPR is referenced as POPI. It's if at a legal level, I'm told, is a little bit more stringent than GDPR specifically in terms of its coverage from natural persons to businesses, etc. It's being implemented across all of our businesses, and certainly from our perspective in the software industry in general, we're very cognizant of that, and it's a big part of what we have to take care of. In terms of security standards and compliance, there also is a very strong part of our industry and understood by all. And generally speaking, the kind of typical software frameworks and standards we work within, whilst strong and robust and very well put in place. Again, as per Lewis, we aren't slaves to those, so we do absolutely comply, but make sure we're working with the clients in a way that deals with those requirements and manages them properly. Certainly a strong standards basis, and historically a big part of South Africa. From a legal structure perspective, we are very UK based, so I think very similar again to Australia from a legal framework and approach. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We're going to wrap up with this question, but just before we do so, Shashi, did you have anything to add to that one around security?
Not really, Sharon. I think security standards that are enforced here are pretty much the global norms, ISO, OWASP, etc. So from that perspective, yeah, we're generally straightforward compliant.
All right, thank you. Well, it's actually 1 o'clock, which is the advertised close time for this event. So thank you everyone so much for giving up your time today. We'll be sending around a short survey just to get your thoughts. And the Bepessa team will remain available to answer any questions you might have. I will include their contact details with the survey email. Wishing you all a wonderful day ahead. Stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks so much.